It is a deep winter morning in the late 1970s. The city still lies mostly asleep under a heavy blanket of snow. In the pre-dawn darkness, Oleg quietly rises from his narrow bed in a communal apartment on the outskirts of Moscow. The air in the room is cold. A thin layer of frost rims the inside of the window pane. He wraps himself in layers, a thick quilted coat, a woolen scarf, felted Valenki boots, bracing for the frigid air outside. As he steps into the corridor, he moves slowly and softly so as not to wake the neighbors sharing the flat. Outside, the world is hushed and peaceful. The snow-covered street glows faintly under orange streetlights. All is still, except for the distant, low hum of a tram and the soft crunch of Oleg's boots in the snow. His breath forms pale clouds that drift and vanish in the darkness. Above, a few stars still shimmer in the early morning sky. There is a calm in this hour before the city's usual bustle, a calm that Oleg treasures, even as the cold pinches his cheeks. He walks to the tram stop at the end of his block. The stop is just a simple metal sign and a small shelter half buried in snow, but to Oleg it is a familiar landmark of his daily life. A faint light glows within the shelter, where an older woman, another early commuter, waits, bundled in a thick shawl. Oleg nods a silent greeting. In these quiet moments, words are often unnecessary. They both know the routine, each morning, waiting together in the dim light for the first tram of the day. Soon, a gentle vibration in the rails and a distant electrical whir announce the tram's approach. A single yellow headlight appears down the line, cutting through the snowy darkness. The tram car arrives with a screech of metal on metal, wheels sparking slightly against icy tracks. It is an old red and cream electric tram, its sides scuffed by decades of use. Oleg can see through the frosted windows that a few hardy souls are already on board, hunched against the cold. The doors rattle open and warm. Steamy air gusts out, smelling of metal, damp wool, and the faint ozone of the overhead wires. Oleg steps up carefully. The metal steps are slippery with ice. Inside, the tram's lights cast a soft yellow glow on worn wooden seats. He finds a space to stand near the door, holding onto a metal pole that is cold to the touch. The older woman from the stop settles on a seat nearby with a sigh. There is a quiet camaraderie among the passengers at this hour. Everyone is still waking up, faces serene and drowsy. Some gently close their eyes, rocking with the motion as if lulled by the tram's slow melody. With a lurch, the tram moves forward along its route toward the city center. Outside the windows, Moscow's streets glide by in monochrome, snow piling on sidewalks, occasional silhouettes of early risers trudging along, the flicker of lamps in apartment windows coming to life. The tram passes rows of tall Soviet apartment blocks, Khrushchevkas, buildings, dark against the gray pre-dawn sky. In the distance, an electric trolleybus hums along a cross street, its twin overhead poles showering small blue sparks as they slide along the power lines. As the tram carries Oleg onward, he gazes out at the quiet city and lets his mind drift. He has made this journey to the factory each workday for years, yet each morning it feels almost meditative. The gentle sway of the tram and the rhythmic clatter of wheels on track create a soothing cadence. He recalls stories his father told him of a time after the Great Patriotic War, when trams and buses were few and far between. Back then, his family walked miles on foot or if they were lucky, hitched a ride on the back of a horse-drawn wagon. Now, in the 1970s, Oleg silently gives thanks for the reliable electric tram that arrives every morning like clockwork, sparing him a long, freezing trek through the snow. At a larger intersection, the tram stops and Oleg transfers to a trolley bus that will take him closer to the factory district. The trolley bus, painted green and cream, waits quietly, connected by slender rods to overhead wires. Oleg steps aboard and drops a few kopecks into the fare box, remembering to take a tiny paper ticket from the machine. The fare is nominal, almost symbolic, kept low by the state so that everyone can afford to ride. The heat inside the trolley bus fogs the windows and provides welcome warmth. A dozen passengers sit or stand, bundled in coats, each in their own morning reverie. A young mother cradles a toddler wrapped in layers of wool. An older man in a heavy uniform rubs his hands together for warmth, his breath still visible in the air. Despite the early hour, there is a shared sense of purpose among them. These are the people who keep the great city running, one day at a time, all traveling together in this humble vehicle. The trolley bus glides off, nearly silent except for the soft whir of its electric motor and the occasional hiss of brakes. Through the windows, the city begins to awaken. Hints of dawn light the eastern horizon in deep blue. The wide boulevards are still mostly empty. Only a few private cars creep along, their tires crunching over ice and snow. In the Soviet Union, private automobiles are rare luxuries, curiosities almost. For most citizens like Oleg, life is lived in public, in shared apartments, shared kitchens, and on shared transport. Life without cars is simply normal. People get around by foot, by bicycle, or most often by relying on the vast network of trams, buses, and trains that connect every corner of the city. As the trolley bus approaches the industrial district, more workers hop on at each stop, and the vehicle becomes cozy and crowded. Many wear the same kind of quilted jackets and felt boots as Oleg on their way to factories and depots for the morning shift. The windows are completely fogged now, but everyone seems to know by instinct or habit when their stop is near. It's true. Each halt, a few people call out the stop name or politely excuse themselves as they squeeze toward the door. Fellow passengers wordlessly cooperate, shuffling aside in a gentle choreography to let others off. There is a quiet etiquette to it, a morning ritual perfected over years. Stand close, hold tight, keep bags out of the way, help shorter passengers reach the overhead strap if needed. Oleg's stop is the final one, the terminus near the factory gates. He steps off the trolley bus into the sharp cold air once more. The sky in the east is now tinted pink and gold as the sun prepares to rise. Before him looms the silhouette of the factory complex where he works as a foreman. Already a few smokestacks have begun to plume white steam into the crisp morning. He has arrived with time to spare. With red ears and nose from the cold, Oleg stamps his feet and smiles a little, grateful for the smooth journey this morning. He takes a brief moment to watch the trolley bus turn around for its next run. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a bright floral scarf peeking out from under her hat, catches Oleg's eye and gives a friendly wave as she powers the vehicle back towards the city. Oleg waves back. He knows that her workday, like his, is just beginning. In a few minutes, she'll be carrying another load of passengers, perhaps the next shift of workers or students heading to classes, linking each of them to their destinations. In the silence of the snowy street, the departing trolley's electric motors hum as if in gentle song. Now Oleg walks the last stretch to the factory on foot. The snow crunches satisfyingly under each step. This short walk, just a few hundred meters, allows him to fully awaken and gather his thoughts for the day. Above the rooftops, the winter sun finally breaks free of the horizon, casting a pale glow over the city's chimneys and high-rises. He reflects that even without owning a car, something that only a small minority of Soviet families possess, he is able to traverse the vast city with relative ease each day. The trams and trolleybuses are like arteries of a living organism, reliably carrying millions of people like him to work, to school, to the market, and back home again. In this pre-dawn hour, he feels especially connected to that great shared heartbeat of the city. As he reaches the factory gate alongside a trickle of fellow workers, Oleg feels the day's first warmth from the sun on his face. He breathes in the cold, clean air deeply. Another day's journey is complete. His workday is about to begin. Far behind him, the tram and trolley lines he rode will continue shuttling back and forth, now filling with more commuters as the peak of morning rush arrives. But for a brief moment in the gentle quiet of the winter sunrise, Oleg savors the calm. He thinks of his family, his daughter in Leningrad, his elderly mother in a faraway village, and takes comfort knowing that though they are scattered across the Soviet Union's immense distances, the same network of trains, buses, and trams connects them all. Deep winter in the countryside, in a tiny rural village, thousands of kilometers from Moscow, winter has a different rhythm. Here, Vera, Oleg's mother, awakens to a bedroom filled with the pale blue light of dawn reflecting off snow. The wooden farmhouse creaks in the grip of deep cold. Vera is in her late 60s, a grandmother now, with silver hair tucked under a warm kerchief. As she rises from under heavy quilts, she moves slowly, feeling the stiffness in her bones that the winter always brings. She can hear the wind outside, a gentle whoosh around the corners of the house, and the soft rustle of snow hitting the window glass. Vera wraps a thick shawl around her shoulders and peeks into the small adjoining room where her 10-year-old grandson, Sasha, is still curled up on the stove bed. The boy sleeps on a special platform atop the big clay stove that heats the house, one of the warmest spots in their home, especially in winter. Vera smiles at his sleeping form, remembering Oleg at that age, and before him, her own brothers who slept in that same cozy spot in their childhood. She lets Sasha rest a little longer as she starts the morning chores. Stepping into felt boots, Vera goes out to the yard to fetch water from the well. The morning is stunningly quiet and bitterly cold. The snow in the yard lies pristine and sparkling under the early light. Each step she takes leaves a crisp impression. The only sounds are the squeak of the snow under her boots and the distant caw of a crow perched on the barren oak tree by the road. She draws up a bucket of water, the pulley squealing softly, and her breath billows around her face. For a moment she pauses, bucket in hand, to take in the familiar view. Small wooden houses with steep, snow-laden roofs, a few plumes of smoke already rising from chimneys as neighbors kindle their morning fires. In Simbutsk, the houses stretch endless white fields and forests rimmed with frost. It is as if time stands still here in winter. The village feels isolated, a world unto itself. There are no cars to be seen. Indeed, the village has perhaps a single old truck assigned to the collective farm and maybe one or two motorcycles. In these snowy months, even those seldom venture out. The main road that connects their village to the highway is often impassable after storms until a plow comes, which can take days. Instead, paths are made by footsteps and sometimes by horse-drawn sleighs gliding over the snow. Vera's neighbor, an old farmer named Grigory, still keeps a sturdy brown horse. She sees him now across the lane, hitching that horse to a simple sled. The sled is laden with milk cans. He's getting ready to deliver fresh milk to the local dairy collection point on the outskirts of the village. Vera raises a hand in greeting, and he waves back, his beard coated in frost, a jovial grin on his face. Despite the challenges of winter, there is a contentment in these routines honed over a lifetime. Back inside the warm kitchen, Vera stokes the stove and starts boiling water for tea. The fire crackles softly, spreading a comforting heat through the small house. Sasha has woken, drawn by the sounds of morning and the smell of buckwheat porridge that Vera has put on the stove. He shuffles into the kitchen, wrapped in a worn but warm housecoat and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Outside, the pale morning has brightened. Sunlight now sets the snow aglow in shades of gold. Today is a school day, but in this remote place, the concept of a daily school commute depends entirely on the season and weather. In the harshest weeks of winter, classes are often suspended or taught by radio for the handful of children in the village. The district school is in a larger village several kilometers away, and to get there means taking the bus, or when the roads are closed by snow, not getting there at all. Sasha's school has been closed for a week due to a particularly heavy blizzard that blocked the road. He doesn't mind too much. Like many children, he finds magic in these snowy days off, spent sledding down the small hill behind the barn or helping his grandma with small chores. Still, he misses his friends and the adventure of the bus ride to school. As they eat breakfast together, Vera and Sasha talk about the day. The radio atop the cupboard plays a gentle melody of morning music, and then the voice of the announcer cheerfully gives the weather. Temperatures well below freezing, but calm skies. It sounds promising. Vera recalls that the village council hoped to get the road cleared by today. If so, the little bus that connects their village to the outside world might finally resume its route. They have not seen it for many days. Vera glances at the calendar on the wall. It's market day in the district town. She mentally goes over what supplies she might need. If the bus indeed comes, flour, sugar, perhaps fresh kerosene for the lanterns. After breakfast, with the sun higher and brighter, Sasha bundles up to go play outside for a while. Vera stands at the doorway, watching him and a couple of other village children roll a giant snowball for a snowman. Their laughter echoes in the cold air. She notices a set of tracks in the snow leading down the road. Grigory's horse sleigh has already passed, leaving twin grooves. Apart from that, all is still. Overhead, the sky is a brilliant winter blue. Vera remembers her own childhood in the same village, in winters just as quiet. In those days, in the 1940s and 50s, there were even fewer vehicles. A horse-drawn sleigh or wagon was common then for winter travel. just as Grigory still does today. When she was Sasha's age, Vera and her siblings would pile onto their father's sleigh for the bumpy ride to town, snuggled under layers of blankets and straw to keep warm. The journey took the better part of a day for a round trip. Now, more than 30 years later, a bus can cover that distance in under an hour, when the road is clear, of course. She recalls the excitement in the late 1950s when the very first bus route reached their cluster of villages. It felt like a miracle of modern times. A bright blue, Polish-made Autosan bus chugging down the unpaved rural road, bringing with it news, mail, and an easy way to reach the town. People gathered in amazement to watch that first bus come in, its horn honking merrily, the driver waving like a hero. Vera herself was a young woman then, and she remembers taking one of those early bus trips to town, marveling at how much faster it was than traveling by cart. Ever since, the weekly or sometimes twice weekly bus has been a lifeline, knitting their small village to the wider world beyond the forests and fields. Today, seeing the weather clear and feeling a stir of hope in her chest, Vera decides that if the bus comes through, she and Sasha will venture to town. They both could use a change of scenery after being snowbound. Sasha eagerly agrees when she tells him. He loves riding the village bus, which always feels like a little adventure. It might even reach the town's cinema if they're lucky, or at least the sweets shop where his grandmother sometimes buys him a treat. The day passes slowly. Vera tidies the house, feeds the chickens in their coop. The poor things cluck and fluff their feathers in the cold, and knits by the window while Sasha alternates between studying a bit, practicing his handwriting at the table, and darting back out to play. Each time Vera hears a distant engine sound, she pauses her knitting and tilts her head, listening. Mostly it is nothing, or perhaps the drone of a far-off tractor on the collective farm, or the wind playing tricks. But then, around midday, she catches it clearly, the low, coughing rumble of a diesel engine laboring in the distance, accompanied by the crunching of tires on packed snow. Could it be? She sets her knitting aside and opens the door to listen. Sasha, hearing it too, comes running up the steps, cheeks flushed pink from the cold and eyes shining. "The bus, babushka, the bus is coming," he exclaims. Sure enough, as they hastily dress in their winter coats and hats, a small white and blue bus appears at the end of the lane, chugging slowly but steadily. It's the familiar old PAS 6772 village bus, a rugged little vehicle with a stubby nose and high clearance, well suited to rutted rural roads. The bus makes a wide turn around a drift of snow, its chains clinking on the wheels for traction. There are only a few passengers visible through its windows, but as it pulls near the makeshift stop by the village's lone store, Vera sees two of her neighbors waving it down as well. Vera quickly pours hot tea from the kettle into a thermos and packs a cloth-wrapped bundle of snacks, some boiled eggs and rye bread, for the trip, while Sasha hops from foot to foot in excitement. Then, arm in arm, they walk through the crunching snow to the bus stop. The bus driver has already halted, engine idling. He is a heavy-set man in an old navy peacoat and cap with ear flaps. He stepped out for a moment to stretch his legs while a couple of villagers climb aboard. The bus door creaks open and a puff of exhaust mingles with the frosty air. The driver, Nikolai, recognizes Vera and greets her warmly. "Long time no see, Vera Ivanovna. Finally dug ourselves out, eh?" he calls, his voice hearty. She smiles and exchanges a few pleasantries about the weather and the state of the road. Nikolai's cheeks are ruddy from hours of concentration navigating the snowy lanes, but his eyes are kind. He helps boost Sasha up the high steps. "All aboard, young man. Off to town, are you? I hope you're ready for an adventure," he teases. Sasha nods eagerly, holding Vera's hand as they find seats. Inside, the bus is dim and smells of diesel fuel and damp wool. The floor is covered in straw mats, now soggy with melted snow. The heating is minimal. A small grill near the front blows lukewarm air, so everyone remains bundled up. Vera and Sasha choose a double seat. The cushions are worn thin, and the whole bus rattles gently as the engine idles. They wave at a neighbor across the aisle, a kolkhoz farm worker on her way to town for supplies, and she waves back with a grin. There's a sense of cheer on the bus today. After days isolated by the storm, everyone is grateful to be on the move again. With a grind of gears, Nikolai gets back into the driver's seat and pulls the door lever closed. The bus heaves forward, slowly picking up pace as it leaves the village. Sasha immediately presses his face to the cold window, watching their snow-blanketed cottages slip away. The bus bounces over uneven patches. Each bump jostles the passengers, but no one complains. They are used to the idiosyncrasies of rural travel. As the bus heads out along the country road, Vera gazes out at the passing landscape. The fields stretch out, shimmering under the midday sun, and the forest beyond stands silent, dark pines weighed down by snow. In places, drifts narrow the road to a single lane, and Nikolai steers carefully, whistling a folk tune under his breath. At one particularly large drift, progress slows to a crawl. He navigates through it with caution. The bus's tires spin for a moment, unable to grip on an icy patch, and Vera feels a slight worry, but then a few passengers stand instinctively, ready to hop out and push. Just as they do, the tires catch and the bus lurches free. Laughter and a few claps ripple through the cabin. "Good job, Pasha," an old man calls to the young fellow who had started to get off to push. The young man grins, and they all settle back again. In these parts, helping the bus driver by pushing a stuck vehicle is just part of the journey. It's a shared experience that turns strangers into momentary friends. Rolling onward, the bus passes a frozen creek where the wooden bridge is coated in ice. Nikolai eases the bus over it slowly. On the other side, they see something uncommon. A small Gaz-69 military jeep parked by the roadside, with two soldiers in thick overcoats inspecting a telegraph pole. It's a reminder that beyond their sleepy village life, the larger Soviet system is present even here, maintaining lines, checking infrastructure. The soldiers wave as the bus trundles by, and some passengers wave back. As the miles go by, Sasha grows restless in the way children do when cooped up. Vera pats his hand and nods toward her bag. "Should we see what we packed?" she asks. His eyes light up. They quietly unwrap the bundle of food and share a simple snack as the scenery slides past their window. The tea from the thermos is still hot, and Vera pours it into the metal lid, offering Sasha a sip. It warms them from the inside. The gentle motion of the bus, combined with their full bellies, makes Sasha a bit drowsy. Soon he leans against Vera, watching the trees blur by, his eyelids heavy. Vera herself feels a peaceful lull. The sound of the engine becomes a low, steady drone, and the conversations on the bus are soft. People chatting about the market, the weather, the latest news from the town. After nearly an hour's travel, signs of the district town appear, a scattering of small houses that gradually thickens into streets, telephone poles with posters advertising events at the Palace of Culture, a tractor depot, and a snow-cleared yard where children are playing. The transition from country solitude to the modest bustle of town is subtle but palpable. By the time the bus pulls up to the small central bus station, Sasha is fully awake again, craning his neck to see the new sights. Townsfolk in padded coats hurry along shoveled sidewalks. A line of people stands outside the bread store, their breaths fogging in the cold. A tram line runs down the main street. Two bright red tram cars coupled together trundle by, bell clanging gently to warn a pedestrian. To Sasha, the town seems big and exciting, even though it is just a small provincial center with a few thousand residents. Nikolai parks the bus and opens the door with a whoosh. 1 hour stop, comrades, he calls out. This is the turnaround point. He will rest and have lunch before the return trip. The passengers file out. Vera and Sasha thank him as they descend to the snowy pavement. We'll see you for the ride back, Vera says. I won't leave without you, Nikolai assures with a grin. Hand in hand, grandmother and grandson walk toward the market square. The town might be humble, but to them it feels almost like a mini-city. There's the crunch of cleared snow underfoot and an air of liveliness. Buses from other villages are parked nearby, and their drivers chat and smoke hand-rolled cigarettes by the station wall. A few older cars, boxy Ladas and a dusty Moskvich, are parked along the street, but they are outnumbered by horse carts and people on foot carrying sleds loaded with goods. The scarcity of private cars is evident. Here, as in the big city, most people rely on public means or their own legs. A life without cars is simply ordinary reality, but that doesn't limit movement. If anything, it makes the town center full of walkers and communal activity. Vera completes her errands at a measured pace. They buy fresh black bread and sugar at the grocery after a short wait in line, as is often the custom. They stop at the open-air market, where peasant women from nearby collective farms sell potatoes, onions, and home-cured sausages. Vera chats with a familiar vendor about how their winter stores are holding up. Sasha browses the stalls with wide eyes. Piles of colorful pickles in glass jars, baskets of dried mushrooms, and strings of smoked fish catch his attention. Vera purchases a paper-wrapped parcel of tea, loose Georgian tea, the kind she likes best, and some oranges that have come all the way from the southern republics, a special treat in the depths of winter. With a burlap shopping bag now full, they make one last stop, the sweets shop. It's a tiny place, but the windows are painted with cheerful winter scenes, and inside it smells of vanilla and sugar. She lets Sasha choose a pastry, a sugar-glazed bun, and buys a bar of Alyonka chocolate to share later. As they leave the shop, they notice a small crowd across the square by the cinema. A new film is showing, and there's a playful painted poster of a cosmonaut comically juggling planets. Not enough time for a movie today, but just seeing the poster adds to Sasha's excitement. Time passes quickly and pleasantly, and soon they must return to the station. By early afternoon, clouds have rolled in and a light snow is falling again, dusting the town in fresh white. They hurry back to the bus, where Nikolai is already revving the engine, its coarse rattle beckoning passengers for the return journey. Vera and Sasha climb aboard with their parcels. The bus is a bit fuller now. A few more villagers from outlying hamlets have joined for the trip back, laden with shopping bags, a new kettle, or other sundry items poking from burlap sacks. One family even has a live chicken in a crate, which clucks indignantly at the bumps in the road. Such is the reality of provincial logistics. People carry whatever they can by hand or on the bus, since personal vehicles or delivery services are virtually non-existent for them. As the bus departs the town and retraces the route toward home, Vera feels content. She glances at Sasha, who is happily nibbling the last of his pastry, and thinks about how different his childhood is from hers. He gets to ride a bus to school, most days, visit a town with electric lights and a cinema, and perhaps one day he'll even travel far beyond their region. In her youth, travel was rarer and slower. She silently thanks the modest bus they're on and all the other humble transports of their society for shrinking the distances that once felt so vast. The ride back is smooth, and the falling snow outside gradually thickens, making the landscape hazy and dreamlike. The bus's headlights come on as daylight fades early on this winter afternoon. Inside the bus, it grows quiet. Many passengers, warm now and tired from the day, nod off to sleep. Sasha, too, leans against Vera and closes his eyes, clutching the chocolate bar in his lap to ensure it doesn't tumble away. The rhythmic bouncing of the bus on the road and the muted conversations, a pair of old men discussing the price of potatoes, a mother humming to her baby, create a lullaby of everyday life. When they reach the village, twilight has settled. The familiar wooden houses emerge from the gentle whirl of snowflakes as Nikolai carefully navigates to their stop. Vera rouses Sasha, and they gather their belongings. They step down into the fresh snow, thanking the driver once more. The bus door closes, and through the window, Nikolai gives a brief goodbye honk of the horn, a friendly gesture as he heads off to the next village down the road to complete his route. Vera and Sasha watch the bus disappear into the snowy dusk, its red tail lights glowing and then fading away. How quiet the village feels after the bus's departure, as if a visitor has come and gone. Sasha hefts the shopping bag like a proud helper, and they walk the short path back to their house. The sky is a deep indigo now, and one by one, warm lights blink on in cottage windows around them. Inside their home, after shaking off the snow and putting away the goods they bought, Vera lights a kerosene lamp and then the stove. As the fire crackles to life, they both sit for a moment with cups of hot tea. Sasha breaks off a square of the chocolate and shares it with his grandmother, the sweet, creamy taste melting blissfully on their tongues. They are pleasantly tired. Through the window, Vera can see the village lane, faintly illuminated by the glow from house windows and the silvery sheen of moonlight on snow. There are no car headlights piercing the darkness, no engine sounds, only the whisper of the wind and the far-off bark of a dog echoing in the stillness. It is a life without cars indeed, she muses, but not a life without motion or connection. The day's little voyage to town has brought new energy and needed supplies. The memory of the kindly driver, the companionship of neighbors on the bus, and the sights of the town all linger in her mind as she and her grandson prepare for bed. Before retiring, Vera steps outside one last time to fetch a log for the stove. The night is cold and brilliantly starry. To the east, she notices a faint orange glow on the horizon, likely the lights of a distant city, or perhaps just the reflection of the moon on low clouds. Standing under the endless sky, Vera feels both the vastness of her country and the closeness of her community. Even far from the great cities, even without personal automobiles or modern highways, they are all gently bound together by the threads of the transportation system, the country buses, the village carts and sledges, the trains that occasionally whistle in the distance. These are the threads that weave her simple village life into the grand tapestry of the Soviet Union. With a contented heart, she closes the door against the cold and settles in for a long winter's night, knowing that come morning, the cycle of journeys will begin anew. A winter evening ride home. That same winter day, long after the pale sun has set, Oleg's work shift ends at the factory. He steps out of the plant's gates into a dark, early evening. Snow is falling gently, large, fluffy flakes that glint in the glow of street lamps. The streets are busier now than in the tranquil dawn. It's rush hour, and throngs of workers from various factories in the district are streaming toward the tram stops, bus terminals, and the nearby metro entrance. Oleg pulls his fur hat down over his ears and tightens his scarf. He feels the pleasant fatigue of a day's labor in his arms and back. Joining the flow of people, he decides to take the metro for part of his journey home. It will be warmer and faster given the weather. A short walk brings him to the local metro station, whose entrance is marked by a red M shining through the snow. Descending the long escalator, Oleg is enveloped in the familiar underground warmth, tinged with the smell of steel, coal dust from the heating system, and a faint trace of cheap perfume from a fellow passenger. Down on the platform, it's a different world from the quiet of early morning. Crowds stand in thick rows, everyone bundled in coats and carrying briefcases, tool bags, or net sacks filled with groceries, snatched up on the way home. The station's marble walls and ornate mosaics, depicting scenes of workers and farmers in vibrant tiles, oversee the daily procession. Despite the hustle, there's a certain order to it. Many have done this commute for years and know exactly where to stand, so they'll be nearest the car door that aligns with the station exit at their destination. Oleg doesn't worry about that today. He's simply glad to be out of the cold. A rush of wind and a growing rumble signal the approaching train. In moments, its headlights burst out of the tunnel and it screeches to a halt. The doors slide open and a swell of humanity presses out and in. Oleg moves with the crowd, skillfully slipping into a small gap and finding just enough space to stand without touching the doors. The car is packed. Warm, humid air fogs the windows. For a minute or two, there's shuffling and murmured, "Izvinit," excuse me, as people settle, clutching at ceiling handles and leaning against walls. The train lurches forward. Inside the carriage, it's brightly lit and relatively quiet, save for the clatter of wheels on tracks and the periodic announcements of upcoming stations. Advertisements for books and winter boots line the walls above the seats, and a large Soviet emblem decorates the end of the car, reminding riders that even this daily commute is part of the grand socialist system. Oleg is pressed between a tall man in a black coat reading Pravda and Babushka balancing two bulging bags of vegetables at her feet. As the train accelerates, he instinctively widens his stance to keep balance, one hand gripping an overhead strap. The babushka sways, and the man with the newspaper quickly reaches out to steady her elbow without even looking up from his paper, as if this were second nature. She nods in thanks. In this tight space, small kindnesses matter. With each station, the composition of the crowd shifts. At one stop, a cluster of students pours out, laughing and bounding up the platform steps, heading home after evening classes at the institute, perhaps. At another, an exhausted nurse in a white coat squeezes in, likely ending a hospital shift, and a gentleman immediately gives up his seat for her. She accepts gratefully and almost melts onto the bench in fatigue. Oleg watches these exchanges quietly. There's an unspoken camaraderie among commuters at day's end. Everyone is tired, eager to get home, understanding of the collective discomfort, and trying to make it just a bit more bearable with courtesy. After a few stops, Oleg exits the metro near the city center to transfer to his final tram home. On the escalator up, he takes a moment to appreciate the station's beauty. High ceilings, with ornate moldings curve overhead, and crystal chandeliers cast a soft light that makes the marble underfoot gleam. He's seen it thousands of times, but tonight, with snow on his coat and a good day's work behind him, the station looks especially magnificent, like the great hall of a palace, but filled with ordinary people. It makes him smile with a touch of pride. This is one of the achievements of his country, making even transit a thing of dignity. Back at street level, the snow has intensified. A thick white blanket muffles the honks of the few cars and the chugging of buses. The trams still clatter along, sparks flying from their overhead wires as they contact the lines. Oleg catches his tram just in time. It's quite full, too, mostly with shoppers carrying the day's purchases. A pair of children sit snuggled up to their mother, dozing. Likely they've been brought along to buy new winter boots and couldn't withstand the long day. A young man in factory overalls stands near the door, his head nodding as he fights sleep on his feet. The tram's heaters are on, and the windows are foggy, save for where some passengers have wiped a circle to peer out into the snowy darkness, checking for their stop. Through one such porthole, Oleg sees familiar landmarks pass, a statue of a wartime hero, the illuminated facade of a bookstore, the small park that will soon be decorated with ice sculptures for the New Year holiday. Each sight is comforting in its normalcy. As the tram negotiates a turn, it gives a sudden jolt. A few people stumble. Oleg gently catches the arm of the young man beside him, preventing him from falling onto the mother with her sleeping children. They exchange a courteous nod. "Tough day, eh?" the young man whispers. Oleg just pats him on the back lightly, a gesture of solidarity. The tram eventually reaches Oleg's stop in his residential district on the city's outskirts. It's a large loop where several lines end, and beyond stretches a sea of apartment blocks. It's much quieter here than downtown. The hour is now late. Only the haloed streetlights and the crunch of snow underfoot break the silence. Many windows in the tall buildings glow with cozy light. Families having dinners or listening to the evening radio broadcast. Stepping off the tram, Oleg feels the cold kiss of night air on his cheeks again, but he also feels content. He has nearly completed another day's circle without ever needing a personal car. In truth, he doesn't miss it. Moving alongside his fellow citizens, sharing space and moments, has its own warmth. As he walks the final few minutes to his apartment, the crunch of snow under his boots, he hums a tune that was played by a street accordionist he heard at the metro station earlier. The melody mixes with the whisper of snowfall. Behind him, the tram's bell dings as it reverses for its next run, and a conductor wishes a last passenger good night. Upstairs, in his cozy flat, after shaking off the snow, Oleg enjoys a late supper with his wife, who herself has stories of a crowded bus ride from the garment factory today. They listen to a bit of music on the radio. Outside, the city's transit network continues to pulse. Into the night buses ferrying third shift workers, freight trams delivering goods to factories, and the last metro trains carrying late theater goers and students home. As Oleg finally lays his head on his pillow, he reflects on the day's simple journeys. There were no personal cars, no lone drives, only collective movements, shared warmth on a crowded train, shared laughter at a tram's sudden jolt, shared effort to make it through winter's demands. He closes his eyes to the faint sound of the distant tram, and the knowledge that tomorrow morning, as always, the cycle will begin anew. With that comforting thought, he drifts to sleep, the city quietly humming around him. Spring arrives in the city. The harsh winter gradually gives way to spring. In Leningrad, the change comes subtly at first, a January thaw that coats the streets in slick ice, a few more minutes of daylight each week. By March, the true spring thaw begins in earnest. Nina's, Oleg's 20-year-old daughter, experiences it firsthand each morning as she makes her way to Leningrad State University. She lives in a crowded student dormitory on Vasilyevsky Island, sharing a small room with two other girls. One late March morning, Nina steps outside and finds the air noticeably softer, the bite of frost replaced by a cool dampness. The snowbanks that once towered along the sidewalks have started to shrink and turn gray, their edges melting into slushy rivulets that run along the curbs. The city is waking from winter with the sound of dripping water everywhere, icicles releasing their hold on eaves and puddles splashing under passing trolley buses. Nina is dressed for the unpredictable weather. She still wears her wool coat, but leaves it unbuttoned, and she's swapped her heavy felt boots for rubber galoshes, knowing that Leningrad's spring means navigating puddles as wide as lakes. She slings her book bag over her shoulder and begins her commute. Usually she takes the tram across the island to the university, but today the tram line is delayed. She sees a cluster of people at the stop waiting and overhears that a section of track is flooded by meltwater. Instead of waiting, Nina decides to walk a bit and catch a metro for the next district. It's a pleasant enough morning for a stroll, and she smiles at the thought of stretching her legs. As she walks, Nina savors the spring atmosphere. The city's grand old buildings, so stern under snow, now gleam with moisture and emerging color. She passes a small park where children in bright scarves are splashing happily through snowmelt under the watchful eyes of babushkas on benches. The smell of wet earth and the tang of the nearby Neva River fill the air. After the monochrome palette of winter, there is a sense of color returning. She notices the first hardy green shoots of grass peeking beside a fence and the soft pastels of dawn sky reflecting in puddles. Nina reaches the entrance of the Primorskaya Metros station. The metro in Leningrad is newer and smaller than Moscow's famed system, but it is nevertheless the pride of the city. She descends a long escalator deep underground, the rubber steps carrying her down as classical music plays softly over the station speakers. The walls are tiled in clean geometric patterns, and the air, though cool, lacks the sting of the wind above. Commuters stand calmly on the escalator, some men in fraying coats clutching briefcases, women with colorful kerchiefs tied under their chins, fellow students with stacks of books. Everyone seems in a slightly better mood now that winter is ebbing. There are even faint smiles, and Nina catches fragments of cheerful conversation about spring onions appearing in the markets or plans for the May Day holiday. On the platform, Nina boards the next metro train, which arrives with a rush of wind. The car is moderately filled, not as jam-packed as peak winter days, when delays often caused crushes of people. She finds a spot by the window to stand. The train car lurches gently as it departs, and she gazes through the window at the dark tunnel quickly giving way to the bright lights of the next station. Within minutes, she is at Gostiny Dvor station in the heart of the city. Exiting the metro, Nina emerges onto Nevsky Prospect, the main avenue. It's bustling with activity despite the mid-morning hour. The sidewalks glisten with moisture, and city workers are busy clearing remaining snow and opening up drainage grates to help the meltwater flow away. A tram clatters by on the boulevard, dinging its bell to nudge pedestrians out of its path. Buses growl along, splashing through puddles. The traffic here includes more private cars than back in her neighborhood, but still relatively few by Western standards. She sees a polished black Volga car, a government vehicle likely, glide past, as well as a humble little Zaporozhets with an anxious-looking driver navigating around a water-filled pothole. Mostly, though, the street is ruled by the masses on foot and on public transit. Nina continues on foot toward her university campus along the Neva's embankment. The great river is starting to throw off its ice. Huge flows drift slowly downstream, and patches of open water ripple with chilly spring wind. She pauses on a bridge to watch for a moment. How many people before her, she muses, have stood here in springtime, feeling this same sense of renewal. The city's soul seems to sigh with relief as the weight of winter lifts. Her classes pass by in a blur of lectures and note-taking. By afternoon, the sun has broken through the clouds, illuminating the city with a golden light. After her last seminar, Nina decides to take a different route home to enjoy the weather, a combination of tram and walking. The temperature has risen enough that she carries her coat over her arm. Like many young people in Leningrad, she cherishes these first warm days. There is almost a festival feeling in the air as she and throngs of others fill the sidewalks, opting to walk an extra stop or two rather than immediately crowd onto transit. At a major tram junction, she waits with a group of about 20 others for her tram. The overhead wires buzz and crackle occasionally. Soon, a vintage LM68 tram car, painted in red and yellow, pulls up with a screech of brakes. The tram is fairly full, and a dozen people disembark, stepping around puddles. Nina and others board. She stands in the middle aisle, lightly holding the back of a seat for balance. The car jerks forward, and the conductor, a matronly woman in a blue uniform, comes down the aisle, making sure everyone has a ticket. Nina shows her monthly student pass, a prized possession that gives her unlimited rides for a low fixed fee. A few passengers without passes drop coins into the conductor's leather pouch and receive tiny paper tickets in return. The conductor moves on, gripping loops overhead as the tram sways. The ride is slow and soothing. The tram passes through old neighborhoods of Leningrad, rattling over canal bridges and between rows of ornate buildings, still bearing a few scars from the war decades earlier. At times, the tracks dip into shallow, flooded stretches where meltwater hasn't drained. The motorman navigates these carefully, and the tram's wheels make a splashing sound. Sunlight streams through the windows, warming the faces of passengers. Nina notices an elderly gentleman dozing, his chin on his chest, and a young boy pressing his nose to the glass, fascinated by the city scenes rushing by. Every now and then, the tram halts with a jolt to allow another tram to pass on a single track section or to wait for a sluggish truck to clear an intersection. During one such pause, Nina overhears two middle-aged women next to her discussing their daily commute woes. One complains, so with a chuckle, how that morning she had to wait almost an hour for a bus because the first two that came were too full to board. The other recounts how, during the worst of winter, she often chose to walk a couple of kilometers to work rather than risk being packed like a sardine in the bus. Yet they share these stories with a tone more amused than bitter. This is simply how life is. At least we'll have good weather for walking soon, one says. Da slava bogu, yes, thank God, the other agrees, looking at the sunshine outside. Nina smiles to herself, recognizing the mix of frustration and pride in their voices. She knows that feeling intimately. Everyone does. Public transport can be an adventure, sometimes uncomfortable or unpredictable, yet people carry on with resilience and even humor. In the Soviet Union, these daily journeys are a common experience that binds the city's residents together. Standing in a crowded tram or bus, you become part of a transient little community, everyone swaying together around tight corners and jolting over potholes, sharing glances or the occasional conversation, adapting together to the quirks of the ride. After a few more stops, Nina hops off the tram a bit early, deciding to walk the rest of the way back to her dorm. The afternoon sun is gentle, and she feels like taking in the fresh spring air. She wanders down a side street, lined with budding trees. Small rivers of meltwater flow along the gutters, and she playfully balances on the dry strip of sidewalk between water and wall. A cluster of schoolchildren in their navy uniforms, just out of classes, skip by speaking excitedly about something. She catches words about a coming field trip and smiles, reminded of her own pioneer youth days. Turning a corner, she nearly bumps into a young man around her age with a guitar case slung on his back, standing by the curb with his arm outstretched. For a moment, Nina is puzzled, then realizes he's hitchhiking right here in the city. It's not very common to see in the city center, but student types are always adventurous. The young man grins and says, "Heading to the outskirts. Figured I'd try my luck rather than pack into the metro." Nina nods and chuckles politely, wishing him luck. She knows about hitchhiking, or Av-to-stop as it's called. In fact, some of her classmates are part of a travel club that extols hitchhiking across the country in summer for the price of a few kopecks and a good story. Nina herself hasn't tried it. She usually relies on trains and buses, but the sight of this optimistic guitarist thumbing a ride in the city makes her think of the open road and adventures that warmer weather might bring. By the time she reaches her dormitory, the long northern twilight is beginning. The streetlights flicker on, reflecting in the ever-present puddles. Students lounge near the entrance, chatting and smoking, enjoying the mild evening. Nina feels pleasantly tired from the full day of study and movement. She heads up to her room to drop off her books and then plans to meet a friend for a walk to the Nevis embankment. They want to see if any boats are yet moving on the river or if it's still mostly ice. The two young women stroll side by side along the granite embankment as street lamps cast golden halos in the gathering dusk. The air by the water is chilly, but carries the fresh scent of the Baltic. Large chunks of ice still float downstream, clinking softly against the stone piers, but here and there patches of open water reflect the deepening sky. They walk slowly, arms linked for warmth, and talk about their hopes for summer. Hardly any cars pass along the avenue. This isn't a city of heavy traffic, so their conversation isn't drowned out by engines as it might be elsewhere. Instead, they hear the creak of an old tram crossing a distant bridge and the low hoot of a ship's horn echoing from the harbor. The city feels calm and open, as if emerging from hibernation right alongside its people. For a moment, Nina closes her eyes and simply listens to the city's gentle spring chorus, water flowing, distant laughter, a tram's ding, imprinting this feeling of renewal in her heart. Spring in the city has truly begun. Spring thaw in the village. While the city awakens to spring with celebration, far away in Vera's rural village, the arrival of spring is a mixed blessing. The fierce grip of winter loosens slowly. By early April, the towering snowdrifts have collapsed into rivulets that carve through the dirt lanes. This season is known as the Respetitsa, the time of mud and impassable roads. The ground, still frozen beneath, cannot absorb the meltwater, so it turns the topsoil into a thick, relentless sludge. Vera steps outside one mild morning and surveys the scene. The air carries the scent of thawing earth and last year's decaying leaves. The snow that blanketed everything is mostly gone, revealing patches of brown grass and puddles that reflect the pale spring sky. The village's main track has become a muddy trench. Each footstep is an effort. Boots sink and make a soft, sucking pop when lifted. Chickens roam freely now, pecking at the newly exposed ground, their feet leaving amusing little filigree tracks in the mud. That day, Vera needs to go to the district town for a checkup at the clinic and to buy vegetable seeds for the coming planting season. She ties a plastic kerchief over her usual headscarf, a trick to protect against the drizzle that often accompanies the thaw, and puts on her sturdiest rubber boots. Sasha, on school break before classes resume, insists on accompanying his grandmother to help carry things. They trudge to the bus stop under a sky of shifting clouds. Along the way, they carefully navigate around the worst puddles, sometimes balancing on improvised stepping stones made of broken bricks that villagers have thrown into particularly deep mud pits. At the bus stop, A small wooden bench stands on slightly higher ground, relatively dry. A few other villagers wait there as well. Old Pavel with a sack of potatoes to trade in town, and Marina, a young mother with an infant wrapped against her chest, hoping to buy new baby clothes at the market. Everyone eyes the road, which is now a morass of brown water and ruts. The bus is due any minute, but whether it can handle these conditions is a matter of some suspense. They hear the bus before they see it, the low growl of the engine laboring, the wet squelch of tires spinning. Then around the bend it comes, the same trusty village bus, now painted with fresh mud up to its windows. Nikolai, the driver, proceeds cautiously, steering along the firmer edges of the lane. The bus wobbles and rocks, its wheels seeking traction. At one point, it lurches into a pothole hidden under muddy water, and a collective gasp rises from the waiting passengers as the vehicle tilts ominously. But Nikolai is experienced. He eases off the accelerator and coaxes the bus free from the mire with a spray of mud from the rear wheels. When the bus finally squelches to a halt at the stop, Vera and the others exhale in relief. They clamber aboard, knocking mud from their boots on the metal step. Inside, the usual light-hearted chatter is replaced with a sort of grim camaraderie. Everyone knows this journey will be slow and unpredictable today. As the bus sets off, it feels more like a boat swaying on a viscous sea than a road vehicle. Sure enough, a couple of miles out, the inevitable happens. Where the village road meets the main country road, a section has been washed out by spring floods from a nearby stream. The bus's tires sink to their rims in mud. With a shudder, the vehicle stalls, stuck fast in a muddy quagmire. Nikolai opens the door and scratches his head, looking at the wheels half submerged like a hippopotamus in a swamp. "Everyone, I'm sorry," he says loudly. "We'll need to lighten the bus. Perhaps if most of us get off, I can try to drive it out." Without complaint, all the passengers file out, stepping gingerly onto the slightly drier shoulder. The extent of the muck is apparent and daunting. Nikolai tries revving the engine. The bus strains, wheels spinning in place, flinging arcs of mud. It doesn't budge. Pavel the old farmer chuckles and rolls up his sleeves. "Well, comrades, no use waiting for a tow out here. Let's give it a push." Immediately, the able-bodied men and even a couple of women position themselves at the rear and sides of the bus, bracing against the slick metal. A few had been ready to walk to the nearest farmhouse for a tractor, but they all agree to try brute force first. "Raz, dejva, try, push," calls out Pavel. With grunts of effort, they heave against the bus. At first, nothing. Then a slight movement, a suck, and a lurch. Again, he shouts. The engine roars as Nikolai engages the gear in tandem. This time, the bus shudders forward, crawling out of the rut onto more solid ground. A cheer goes up from the assembled helpers. Had this plan failed, they would have flagged down the next passing tractor or hopped on a neighbor's hay wagon if need be. Improvisation is simply part of life. But today, muscle and willpower were enough. A few villagers clap each other on the back. The bus is free. Everyone's a bit dirtier, but also a bit merrier, bonded by the shared adventure. They climb back on board, wiping their hands on any available rag or handkerchief. Nikolai's once white bus is now painted brown with mud, but it's moving again. He eases it forward, carefully avoiding that stretch of road by driving partly on the grassy verge. The remainders of the trip into town is slow, but mercifully uneventful. By the time they reach the paved highway, all the passengers are back in their seats, breathing sighs of relief and exchanging light jokes about swimming to town. Vera and Sasha share the last of their tea. Someone passes around a few pieces of sugar candy to celebrate. Through the bus windows, the countryside glistens in the afternoon light, fields soggy but waking up with hints of new green, and birch trees dripping steadily as they shed winter's weight. Vera completes her tasks in town, seeing the doctor, who scolds her mildly to mind her arthritis in damp weather, and purchasing packets of carrot, beet, and onion seeds for the kitchen garden. She and Sasha even treat themselves to piroshki at a street stall as a reward for the morning's mud battle, laughing as they recall how Pavel nearly lost a boot in the muck. When it's time to catch the bus back home, they find it parked by the market square. Nikolai is on his knees, scraping caked mud off the wheel wells with a stick, trying to lighten the load for the return. His bus now bears the battle scars of spring, a film of mud on every surface and a fresh dent where a hidden rock met the chassis. "I'll sleep well tonight," he jokes, as Vera and Sasha climb aboard. "We all will," Vera agrees kindly. The journey home is slower, but no one minds. The passengers gaze out at the countryside, now glowing in the soft, late afternoon sun. The fields are turning green with new growth. Flocks of returning geese honk overhead. There's a collective sense of relief, both at having navigated the worst of the thaw and at knowing that each day forward will likely be a little drier, a little easier. In a week or two, the roads will solidify and the normal rhythm will resume, just in time for spring planting. As the bus carefully rolls back into the village at sunset, Vera reflects on the day. Life without cars means days like this, where a simple trip becomes an adventure requiring patience, strength, and neighbors pulling together. It's challenging, yes, but it also highlights the resilience and cooperation of her community. She steps off the bus with Sasha, thanking Nikolai and exchanging waves with her fellow mud-splattered passengers as they disperse to their homes. Tired as she is, Vera feels grateful for the warm spring breeze now drying the hem of her skirt, for the packet of seeds in her basket that promise summer's bounty, and for the dependable village bus and the hands that pushed it, that carried them all through the mire of early spring. In the quiet of the approaching evening, as frogs begin to chorus from the marshes, life in the village carries on, a little messy perhaps, but undeniably rich in spirit. Summer escape to the Dhaka. Summer in the Soviet Union brings long days, warm sun, and a collective yearning to escape the city for a touch of nature. By the time July arrives, the memory of winter's chill is distant. In Moscow, Oleg finds his factory work slowing down a bit as the annual summer holiday rotations begin. This weekend, he has been invited by his friend and co-worker Sergei to help out at Sergei's dacha and enjoy a break from the city's concrete and bustle. Oleg happily accepts. He doesn't have a dacha of his own. Only a lucky minority do, often through their workplace or inherited from relatives. But many Muscovites like him get to visit friends or relatives' country cottages during summer weekends. On Friday afternoon, Oleg leaves the factory a little early with his boss's blessing. his canvas travel bag already packed with a few essentials. He heads straight to the suburban train station to catch an electrichka out of the city. The station, one of Moscow's many rail termini, is teeming with people under the hot sun. The scene is almost festive despite the sweat and crowds. City dwellers laden with bags, tools, and even small furniture pieces jostle on the platforms, all eager to board the outgoing trains. These are the dakhniki, dacha-goers, a weekly migration unique to Soviet summers. Families carrying rolled-up rugs or baskets of groceries, children holding watering cans and fishing rods, elderly folk guarding trays of fragile tomato, seedlings to plant in their gardens. Oleg finds Sergei and his wife near the designated platform. They blend right in with the other passengers. Sergei cradles a new electric fan to bring to the dacha, and his wife balances a woven basket brimming with fresh bread, cucumbers, and a bottle of kvass for the journey. They greet Oleg with smiles. "Ready for some country air?" Sergei asks. "More than ready," Oleg replies, mopping his brow. The city heat has been intense this week, and he's been dreaming of the shade of birch trees and a swim in the pond near Sergei's cottage. A distant loudspeaker crackles, announcing their train's arrival. Soon, a green electric train rumbles into view, slowing to a halt amid clanging metal sounds. Its cars are utilitarian, with hard bench seats and windows that open wide, perfect for summer ventilation. As the doors slide open, a wave of disembarking passengers flows out. These are commuters coming from the outer suburbs, and perhaps some early dacha goers returning from errands in town. Once the initial crowd clears, Oleg and his friends push gently into the car. They manage to find a space on a wooden bench, squeezing in among other travelers. The car fills quickly, and soon every seat is taken, and people stand in the aisles, their bags and bundles tucked wherever there is room. It's a bit cramped, but nobody seems to mind much. The mood is too buoyant. When the train jolts into motion, a cheer even rises from a group of students in the back, as if the weekend has officially begun. Through the open windows flows a warm breeze. The train picks up speed, clattering over switches and leaving the city skyline behind. As they pass the outer neighborhoods, the scenery shifts to stretches of green, forests of birch and pine, meadows sprinkled with wildflowers, little stations with names that evoke woods and lakes. Inside the carriage, the atmosphere is lively. A pair of old men in flat caps play a quiet game of checkers on a portable board between them. Nearby, two middle-aged women chat conspiratorially about their garden crops, swapping tips for growing the best cabbages. A child wanders down the aisle, clutching a kitten, which causes a gentle stir of admiration from seated babushkas. What a sweet little cat. Sergei's wife shares some of her cucumbers and hard-boiled eggs with Oleg and anyone nearby who wants a snack. This kind of impromptu picnic is common on these summer trains. People bring food not just for themselves, but to share, and the communal spirit blossoms. Someone further down produces a guitar and begins strumming a familiar folk tune softly, singing about the Volga River. The clickety-clack of the wheels provides a rhythm, and a few passengers hum along under their breath. As the train rolls deeper into the countryside, Oleg gazes out at the passing villages. In one clearing, he spots children swimming in a creek, their laughter faintly reaching the train. An old woman sits selling freshly picked strawberries by the tracks, hoping to entice travelers through the window at the brief halt. Sergei quickly leans out and buys 2 glasses full of berries when the train pauses, one for his wife and one to share with Oleg. The berries are sun-warmed and delicious, a true taste of summer. After about an hour and a half, the train conductor announces their stop. Oleg, Sergei, and his wife gather their things and make their way to the door, politely weaving through the standing passengers. They hop down onto the platform of a small station that's really just a concrete strip amidst dense greenery. The train clatters off to its next stop, leaving behind a handful of disembarking passengers who disperse quickly, some greeted by relatives with bicycles or horse carts. Sergei's dacha is a short walk from the station. The trio set off down a dusty country lane lined with picket fences. Many others from the train are also walking in the same direction, peeling off into different little lanes towards their respective cottage areas. There's a sense of camaraderie in the air. People nod or say hello to one another, recognizing faces from weeks past, or simply acknowledging that they're all here for the same reason, to unwind under the open sky. The dacha community itself is a quaint collection of wooden cottages and small garden plots. Each property is modest, some just single-room shacks with tin roofs, others slightly bigger cabins, but almost all have a vegetable patch and a few fruit trees. The late afternoon sun casts long rays over rows of potatoes, tomatoes on the vine, and sunflowers bobbing by fence posts. As Oleg and his friends walk in, they hear the distant clink of a spade hitting earth, someone drawing water from a well with the squeal of a pulley, and radio music wafting from an open window where an older couple sits on the porch enjoying tea. At Sergei's dacha, they are welcomed by the scent of pine from a little grove behind the cottage and the excited barking of a neighbor's dog. The cottage is small and painted sky blue with white carved eaves in the old style. Inside, it's warm and a bit stuffy from the week's heat, so the first order of business is to throw open the shutters and windows, letting fresh air sweep through. Dust motes dance in sunbeams as they unpack their things. The rest of the evening is pure peacefulness. Oleg helps Sergei with the task he came for, fixing a loose section of the roof and reinforcing the little shed out back. It's not strenuous work with 2 men sharing the load, and they even turn it into a bit of fun. Sergei climbing up and humming a tune as he hammers, while Oleg steadies the ladder and cracks a joke or two. Meanwhile, Sergei's wife picks ripe currants from the bushes and starts a simple supper. As twilight falls, they light a small kerosene lamp inside the cottage and set up a table outdoors under a pear tree to eat by. The remaining light. Dinner is a rustic feast of fresh vegetables from the garden, boiled new potatoes glazed with dill and butter, and slices of black bread with smoked fish they brought from the city. They sit in old wicker chairs, listening to the chorus of crickets beginning in the grass and the distant murmurs of other dacha dwellers chatting over their own fences. The sky turns hues of lavender and rose, reflecting in a nearby pond, just visible through the trees. When night fully descends, it's gloriously dark and filled with stars, a sight rarely seen in the glare of Moscow. Oleg leans back and breathes deeply. The air smells of foliage, and a whiff of smoke from someone's wood stove heating up a banya sauna for the night. It's hard to believe this morning he was in the city crush of the metro. Now he's enveloped in cricket song and starlight. They decide to take a short walk to the pond before bed. The water is still warm from the day, and Sergei can't resist. Say, quick swim in his shorts, laughing as his splashes disturb a couple of ducks. Oleg and Sergei's wife sit on a log by the shore, dipping their feet in and watching fireflies blink over the reeds. In this tranquil moment, Oleg reflects on how necessary these escapes are. The Soviet cities can be overwhelming. Work, crowds, noise, but the land itself is vast and generous. Even those without cars or luxury vacations find ways to rejuvenate. The state encourages citizens to garden and relax on weekends. Many workplaces, including his own, allot small garden plots. Trains and buses make it possible to reach even far-flung nature. Life without a car doesn't mean being trapped in an apartment all year. It just means the journey to freedom is shared with others, on a train humming through the twilight, or a bus bumping along a dusty road. After a sound sleep in the Dasha's cool attic, where his cot is set up under the sloping eaves, Oleg spends the next day helping around the garden. They prune the apple tree, stack some firewood, and fetch water from the communal well down the lane. In return for his help, Sergei's wife insists on sending him home with a basket of produce, crisp cucumbers, a bundle of fragrant dill, and a jar of homemade cherry preserves. By late Sunday afternoon, it's time to head back to Moscow. They walk back to the little station, joining dozens of other relaxed, sun-bronzed weekenders, returning to the city with dirt under their fingernails and contentment on their faces. The inbound train ride is quieter, more subdued in a pleasant way. People are tired from 2 days of gardening and fresh air. Many nap sitting up, heads lolling gently with the train's motion. Others gaze out the windows at the countryside they'll soon leave behind, already planning in their heads what to do next weekend when they return. A few chatter softly, swapping stories of the giant zucchini they harvested or how refreshing the lake was for swimming. Oleg sits by the open window, the cooler evening breeze brushing his face, and watches as the fields slowly give way once more to the gray suburbs and then to the familiar cityscape of Moscow. When he parts from Sergei and his wife at the Moscow station, they each go their separate ways home. The city's late evening is still warm, but Oleg feels a renewed energy as he boards a tram for the short ride to his district. In his bag, the clinking jars of cherries and the earthy smell of cucumbers are tangible reminders of the countryside's gifts. The tram is sparsely populated at this hour. He finds a seat by a window. The city is comparatively quiet. Many Muscovites, like him, are only just coming back, so the Sunday night streets have a dreamy lullaby quality. Streetlights flash by rhythmically, and he hears the soft thrum of the tram's electric motor. Oleg steps off near his apartment building, tired but happy. Climbing the stairs, he passes a neighbor carrying a basket of apples, likely just arrived from her own dacha trip. They exchange knowing smiles. In his kitchen, as he puts away the food gifts, he contemplates the weekend. He thinks of the train full of hopeful faces heading out of the city on Friday and compares it to the content, peaceful ones returning on Sunday. These simple journeys, though lacking luxury or private cars, provide people like him a deep wealth of experiences, connection to nature, to one another, and to the rhythm of the seasons. With that comforting thought, Oleg retires for the night, already dreaming of his next excursion from the city's grind to the green solace beyond, riding the night train. For some, summer journeys go far beyond a weekend outing. They span hundreds or even thousands of kilometers across the Soviet Union's vast expanse. Later in July, it is Nina's turn to embark on a long-distance trip. The university term in Leningrad has ended, and she has a precious window of free weeks. True to her word, she has planned to visit her grandmother Vera and little cousin Sasha in their distant village. It will be an epic journey, multiple train rides weaving through different republics and regions. Nina is both excited and a little anxious. She has traveled overnight by train before, but never quite so far on her own. One warm afternoon, Nina boards a train at Leningrad's Moskovsky station, beginning the first leg of her voyage. Her itinerary will take her from Leningrad to Moscow on an overnight express, and then onward from Moscow deep into the interior on another train. As she steps onto the platform, she finds herself amid a familiar scene of organized chaos. Long-distance trains stretch out like silver caterpillars. Loudspeakers announce departures in crackling Russian. Families hug goodbye or hustle to load last-minute baggage. The air carries the scent of coal smoke mixed with the sweetness of overripe melons being sold by vendors to travelers. Nina's train, the red and gold, Aurora Express to Moscow, waits gleaming on the track. She clutches her ticket, third-class Platzkartny sleeping carriage, car number 8, and hefts her rucksack. A uniformed provodnitsa, carriage attendant, a stout woman with a tidy blue uniform and a no-nonsense demeanor, stands by the door checking tickets and passports as passengers board. When Nina's turn comes, the provodnitsa glances at her documents and then welcomes her with a practiced smile. Compartment 6, berth 15, she directs, helping Nina up the high steps with a firm hand. Inside, the train car is narrow and filled with the bustle of passengers settling in. The Platzkartny carriage is an open-plan sleeper. Rows of double-decker bunks line the walls with a corridor running alongside them, partially partitioned by waist-high walls. Privacy is minimal. Instead, there's a sense of communal living on wheels for the next several hours. Nina locates her berth, a lower bunk, thankfully, and finds it already made. Up with fresh linen, a crisp white sheet, and a pillow in a clean case. She stows her bag underneath the bench seat, securing it the way seasoned travelers do. Around her, other passengers of all ages are arranging their temporary homes. A young mother spreading out a blanket for her toddler on the opposite lower bunk. Two elderly sisters stowing a large suitcase overflowing with homemade preserves and crocheted gifts. A pair of university students, not unlike Nina, excitedly discussing their travel route as they claim two top bunks. As evening light filters through the windows, the train gives a subtle lurch, coupling with the engine, and with a long, low whistle, it begins to glide out of the station. Nina peers out the window and watches Leningrad's familiar skyline recede. Soon, they are crossing the Neva and picking up speed, leaving the city and its canals behind for the forests and fields beyond. The rhythmic clacking of the rails establishes itself as the backdrop to all other sounds. The Provodnitsa walks down the aisle, offering each passenger steaming glasses of tea from a brass samovar at the end of the carriage. Nina gladly accepts one. The tea is strong and sweet, served in a glass within a metal holder decorated with the Soviet emblem. As she sips carefully, not to burn her tongue, she feels the tension of city life, and the day's preparations melt away. There is something undeniably soothing about being carried along by a train, the world outside turning to a blur of twilight colors. Night falls, and the carriage lights switch to a dim setting. Passengers speak in softer tones or fall silent, gazing out at the darkening land or reading by small personal lamps. Nina strikes up a quiet conversation with the young mother across from her, who looks tired but relieved as her toddler finally dozes off. The woman, named Lena, shares that she's traveling all the way to the Ural Mountains to spend the summer with her parents. In that distant place, her little son can romp in nature while she gets help with childcare. It's a long journey for a small child, she chuckles. But the train is the only practical way. They talk about children and about Leningrad, where Lana lives now, until the conversation lulls. Across the aisle, an elderly couple quietly sip tea from their thermoses. They are on their way to a seaside resort in the Caucasus, a special sanatorium vacation provided by the husband's factory. Nina overhears snippets as they reminisce about the last time they visited, about the healing mineral baths and mountain air awaiting them. Their journey will be long, but they seem content, counting off the stops and days with patient optimism. Above, the two students on the upper bunks are whispering and giggling. One has produced a paperback of poetry and is dramatically reciting a humorous verse by Mayakovsky, causing them to stifle laughter. Further down the carriage, Nina can see the silhouette of one of the elderly sisters, already fast asleep, her arms folded over her belly, while the other sits awake knitting by the faint light, likely too accustomed to early rising to easily change her habits. Nina decides to stretch her legs before turning in. She makes her way to the end of the carriage, carefully stepping over feet and edging past hanging coats. At the end, by the samovar, a narrow vestibule connects to the next car. She stands there a moment by an open window. The night air rushing in is refreshingly cool, smelling of pine and damp leaves. Outside, under a nearly full moon, endless forests interspersed with occasional clearings race by. Sometimes a lone house light flickers in the darkness, or the train roars through a tiny station where a few bundled figures on the platform watch it pass. As she returns to her berth, she nearly bumps into a group of children moving through the corridor. There appear to be about a dozen of them, ranging in age from perhaps 9 to 12, shepherded by a couple of young adults with red kerchiefs around their necks. The children are full of restless energy, even at this late hour, their eyes shining with excitement. Nina realizes they must be a pioneer troop on their way to a summer camp. They shuffle along, the counselors gently urging them to settle down. One boy is humming a campfire song under his breath. A girl clutching a stuffed bear peers curiously into Nina's section as she passes, as if hoping to spot a friend or just taking in all the faces. Nina steps aside to let them through, exchanging a friendly smile with one of the counselors. The young woman, likely not much older than Nina, sighs with a good-natured roll of her eyes. We're off to the Black Sea coast. 2 days more on this train, she tells Nina. They're too excited to sleep. Nina replies, it's a big adventure for them. Good luck. They share a brief camaraderie before the counselor continues ushering her flock toward their sleeping car next door. The sound of giggles and shushing voices gradually fades, and Nina imagines those children eventually drifting to sleep to the lullaby of the moving train, dreaming of sunny beaches and new friends they'll meet at camp. Climbing into her own bunk, Nina tucks her sandals in the corner and draws the light blanket over herself. There is a soft clink of metal on metal as the train navigates a curve, and the gentle swaying is like the rocking of a cradle. She reflects that on this single train, so many lives and stories are briefly intersecting with hers. The young mother, the excited children, the old sisters, the students, and countless others unseen in the other carriages, perhaps a soldier on leave, or tourists, or a man traveling to a far-off construction site. This overnight journey is more than just transportation. It's a moving community, a cross-section of the vast country converging for a time on the same path. The darkness outside is almost complete now, save for the sprinkle of stars and an occasional far-off village light. The quiet conversations have ceased, replaced by an orchestra of soft snores, the rustle of someone turning in their sleep, and the persistent background rhythm of wheels on rails. Nina feels herself drifting off as well, thoughts blurring into dreams. In her half-sleep, the rail sounds become the steady thump of a heartbeat. She dreams of her grandmother's village, of running through open fields as a little girl, of trains and rivers and endless roads. At some indeterminate hour of night, she wakes briefly. The train is stopped at a station, nearly silent except for the distant chirp of crickets outside. She glimpses the station name on a sign, illuminated by the train's lights. It's a small town somewhere between Leningrad and Moscow. A few new passengers climb aboard quietly, their footsteps and whispers strangely loud in the calm. One is a uniformed soldier carrying a duffel bag. Perhaps he's coming off a far-flung posting, Mongolia or the Afghan border, and now heading home on a journey spanning half the continent. He tiptoes to an empty upper bunk a few sections down and lays down with a heavy sigh. As the train jolts back into motion, Nina slips back into slumber, feeling safe and rocked by the familiarity of this collective journey. By the time dawn's early light begins to filter in through the beige curtains of the carriage, most passengers are still asleep, but the Provodnitsa is up, clattering quietly with her samovar, and a few early risers stretch and yawn. Nina blinks awake to a pale pink sky outside and the realization that they are nearing Moscow. True enough, within the hour they arrive. Moscow's Kazansky station is a whirlwind after the relative calm of the night. Nina bids a warm goodbye to the young mother and the friendly students as they each go their own way. She has a planned layover here before her next train. Emerging onto the bustling platform, she is met with the sights and sounds of Russia's capital in full swing. Porters pushing carts piled with luggage, travelers calling out greetings, vendors hawking pierogi, meat pies, and bottled drinks to hungry arrivals. Nina spots a familiar face in the crowd. Her father, Oleg, has come to meet her during her transfer. Her heart leaps as she waves and hurries toward him. They embrace tightly, the distance of many months apart instantly bridged. "You look tired, Krasavitsa, beautiful girl," Oleg says softly, holding her at arm's length to study her face. "Tired but happy," Nina replies, smiling broadly. He insists on carrying her bag and leads her to a quiet corner by a kiosk where they have a little time to sit together. Over 2 cups of strong station chai, served in simple glasses, they catch up in person, talking quickly as if to make up for lost time. She shares highlights of her journey so far and her plans ahead, and he tells her of his work, of his weekend at the dacha, which makes her grin, imagining her serious father chasing chickens in the countryside. All too soon, a muffled announcement signals that Nina's connecting train will be boarding. Oleg walks her to the platform. This next leg will take her southeast, toward the region where Vera's village lies. The train is already waiting, a long chain of green carriages with white numbering. The platform throngs with people carrying bulky sacks and even livestock. She notices a crate with clucking chickens being carefully loaded into the baggage car. This route is less of a luxury express and more of a workhorse train, accommodating villagers, traders, and families making long interprovincial trips. It will be slower, with many stops, winding through vast steppes and farmland. Nina and her father savor their last moments together. He places a gentle hand on her head as if to bless her journey. "Give Mother a big hug from me when you see her," he says, "and write to us often." She nods, promising she will. The conductor calls for passengers to board. With a final squeeze of his hand, Nina steps up into her carriage. She finds her berth, stows her belongings, and quickly returns to the window. The train gives a shudder and a hiss of steam. As it slowly pulls away, she waves at Oleg through the open window, and he waves back, standing tall among the crowd until he is out of sight. The journey from Moscow to the provinces has an entirely different character than the Leningrad-Moscow leg. Now, Nina is among mostly rural folks. Across from her, a kindly-faced babushka settles in with a basket of homemade cheese and jars of pickled mushrooms, likely destined for her relatives. There are a few others. A stern-looking schoolteacher traveling to help with the harvest on her family's farm now that the school year is over, a Red Army private quietly polishing his boots, and further down, an entire family of 5 with the children, already clamoring for the pastries their mother brought. The air carries hearty smells of cured meats and bread. People have come prepared for the long haul. As the train trundles out of Moscow, it passes endless rows of Khrushchevka apartment blocks and factory districts, gradually giving way to open fields filled with sunflowers nodding under the bright noon sun. The pace is slower, the stops more frequent. At every small station, a handful of passengers disembark and others climb aboard. Often, local vendors approach the windows holding trays of goods, freshly boiled corn, smoked fish wrapped in newspaper, bottles of cold compote, fruit drink. Nina delights in this and buys a grilled pirojok filled with potatoes from a smiling teen girl at one station, savoring the simple comfort of warm food as the train jerks into motion again. In the long afternoon, conversation blossoms among the travelers. The babushka across from Nina insists she try a bit of the cheese from her basket. Its sharp, creamy taste reflecting the grassy meadows of her village. In exchange, Nina shares some chocolate candies she had saved. The school teacher, it turns out, is returning to help with the harvest on her family's farm now that the school year is over, and she chats about the difficulties her brother has in securing spare parts for their tractor. This leads to a broader group discussion about farming and the recent weather. A man from another berth interjects that they had a drought scare earlier in June, but rains came just in time. Another woman worries about her kolkhoz's potato yield due to late spring floods. It strikes Nina how connected everyone is to the land here, in contrast to her city life, where seasons mostly mean changing wardrobes. Out here, seasons mean everything. As dusk approaches on this second night of travel, the carriage has formed a temporary little community, just like the previous train. When one of the little children down the aisle grows fussy and starts crying from boredom, the stern teacher surprisingly reveals a soft heart. She pulls out a deck of cards and engages the child in a simple game, soon producing giggles. A mustached man in a factory uniform starts up a quiet patriotic song, and a few others hum along. The babushka begins peeling hard-boiled eggs and passing them around to anyone who wants one. They may have all been strangers in the morning, but by nightfall they care for each other in the casual, genuine way fellow travelers often do. Nina steps out at a longer stop to get some air. The station is rural and rustic, wooden platforms, and a small station house painted turquoise with paint peeling off. The warm night air is filled with the sound of cicadas. Above, a canopy of stars has appeared, more brilliant than she ever sees near the city. She closes her eyes for a moment and then listens to the distant barking of a dog, the laughter of a couple of soldiers, sharing a cigarette on the platform, the rustling of birch leaves. Soon, the train gives two short whistles, the all-aboard signal. Nina hops back on. Not too long now until her destination. By dawn, she should be there. She finds herself too excited to sleep deeply, so she rests in a dreamy, half-awake state. At one point, she reaches into her bag and pulls out a small leather notebook, her travel journal, and jots down a few impressions under the soft glow of a corridor light. Moon over endless plains, kindness of strangers, smell of hay when trains stopped in the dark. These are sensations she never wants to forget. As predicted, in the pale early morning light of the next day, the train finally approaches the stop nearest her grandmother's village. Nina has already been up, washing her face at the little basin and carefully braiding her hair, anticipation building with every clack of the wheels. The station is just a modest platform by a village, not a major town at all. The train begins to slow and she sees a familiar outline standing on the platform. It's Grandma Vera, who has traveled from her village, likely by that once-a-day bus, to meet her beloved granddaughter. Nina's heart swells, seeing the small, stooped figure in a neat, floral dress and kerchief, holding a cane in one hand and a basket in the other. The moment the train halts and Nina steps down, Vera's face breaks into a huge smile, tears of joy in her eyes. They embrace tightly, 3 years of separation melting away in an instant. The basket Vera carries holds a bunch of wildflowers and fresh bread as a welcome gift. But Nina is the one who feels overwhelmingly gifted by being here, in her grandmother's arms, in this quiet corner of the world that is a piece of her own history. The train whistles, and begins to move again, leaving the pair standing together on the near empty platform. It's early morning, mist clings to the fields, and the air is fragrant with dew and wild blossoms. Sasha, now a lively 11-year-old, suddenly bounds out from behind a waiting shed where he had been drowsily sitting. He came along with Grandma for the big welcome. "Nina," he shouts, running up with his satchel flopping. Nina scoops him into a hug, too, marveling at how tall he's grown. The three start making their way down the country road toward the village, walking slowly to match Vera's pace, while a new chapter of their family story begins to unfold. Nina's long journey by rail, though it took days and covered such distance, did not feel like a hardship or an inconvenience. Rather, it was an experience rich with humanity and scenery, a time of reflection and connection that airplanes or automobiles seldom afford. In the vast Soviet land, the trains are the great connectors. Some journeys last not hours but days. The famous Trans-Siberian route spans 7 time zones, a full week rocking and rolling across taiga and steppe, turning each carriage into a traveling village where strangers bond over tea and sunsets seen from the windows. Other trains each summer chug southward to the Black Sea coast, filled with families and children excited for the seaside. Their compartments overflow with beach towels, homemade meals, and joyful anticipation. In those holiday trains, songs are often sung and snacks passed around generously, turning long hours into a rolling picnic. Whether long or short, these train trips weave a web of shared stories across a colossal country. As she walks hand in hand with her grandmother, listening to Sasha excitedly describe his summer adventures, Nina thinks of those steel rails that carried her here and smiles gratefully. Life without a personal car has brought her not only safely to her destination, but given her memories and friendships to cherish for a lifetime. Harvest and autumn journeys. Nina spends the remaining weeks of summer in her grandmother's village. Little Sasha has just returned from 2 weeks at a pioneer summer camp by a nearby lake, bursting with stories and songs that he eagerly shares with Nina. The time is both restful and enlightening for her. She helps Vera with daily chores, learns how to milk the neighbor's cow and bake bread in the wood stove, and every evening they sit on the porch listening to the subtle symphony of rural nightfall, frogs in the marsh, the distant rumble of a tractor finishing late work, the creak of cartwheels along the lane. These weeks in the countryside deepen Nina's appreciation for the slower, earthbound rhythm of life that her grandmother and Sasha know so well. As August progresses, the village shifts into a heightened state of activity. It is harvest time. The surrounding collective farm fields, golden with wheat, dotted with sunflowers and rows of potatoes, beckon the residents to gather their bounty. Nina, eager to contribute, joins in with the villagers for the potato harvest. In the crisp early mornings, she walks out with Vera and a team of locals to the kolkhoz potato field. Women in kerchiefs, men in their work shirts, and even older children spread out in lines. With wicker baskets and burlap sacks at the ready, they dig into the rich, dark soil, turning up plump potatoes. There is laughter and chatter despite the hard work, neighbors teasing each other, trading gossip, and competing lightheartedly to see who can fill their sack fastest. At the edge of the field, The farm's machinery stands as testimony to modest modernization. A couple of Belarus tractors and a rusty truck are being used to haul the bulk of the collected produce. Not far away, some farmers still harness horses to wagons, loading them with hay or sacks of vegetables for short journeys between field and barn. These traditional sites exist side by side with newer machines, a few heavy-duty combines for grain in distant fields, a Soviet-made truck belching smoke as it waits to be loaded. The old Gaz flatbed truck on site shudders under the weight of each load of potatoes as workers toss sack after sack into its bed. A young man named Kolya perches atop the truck to stack and secure the haul, calling out jokingly, "Don't bury me alive in potatoes, folks," which earns hearty guffaws from below. Despite the machinery, much of the work remains manual and communal, just as it was in Vera's youth. Nina finds it exhilarating in a way, so different from sitting in a library or an office. Her muscles ache by midday, but it's a good ache, earned under the wide blue skies with the smell of earth on her hands. Grandma Vera doesn't venture into the fields for heavy labor at her age, but she contributes in other ways. She stays back in the village kitchen, helping prepare a hearty lunch for the returning field workers. Big cast iron pots of buckwheat porridge, fresh cucumbers and sour cream and dill, and jugs of cool birch sap drink. She recalls to the other kitchen women how when she was young, harvest logistics were even simpler. "We had only horse wagons then," she says, slicing bread with a steady hand. "After the war, one wagon for the whole village. We'd load it with hay or grain, and those horses knew the way better than we did. Now at least we have a few tractors, slava bogu, thank God." The other women nod and chuckle, sharing their own memories of past harvests under more trying conditions. One mentions how before the district provided the truck, they'd form human chains to carry sacks to the barn. Things change, little by little, Vera concludes softly, looking out the window where a tractor chugs along, pulling a trailer full of wheat sheaves toward the storage silos. In the late afternoons, trucks from the collective farm depart toward the town's granary and distribution centers, kicking up clouds of dust on the village road. Often they carry not just crops, but also passengers perched atop the sacks, farmhands catching a ride back or accompanying the produce to ensure it's delivered properly. These improvised lifts are an accepted part of the system. With few private cars and limited transport, any vehicle going your way becomes an opportunity. Sasha and some other children sometimes run after the departing trucks for a few yards, waving and whooping for fun, imagining themselves adventurers hitching a ride to far-off places. Nina, with harvest nearly done, knows she must soon return to her own life in the city. September is approaching, and with it her classes in Leningrad. She is reluctant to leave the gentle routine she's found here, the evenings of shelling peas with Grandma on the porch, the walks with Sasha to the river to skip stones, and even the simple thrill of riding the little village bus into town for market day. Yet she also feels recharged and filled with new insights to bring back to her urban world. She writes a long letter to her father describing the harvest days and the sense of community in every task. "Feels like everyone here is part of one big family, Papa," she writes. "We work together, rest together, wait for the same bus, cheer when the harvest is good, and when the truck breaks down, we all push it out of the mud together. I will miss this when I return to the bustle of Leningrad. The first hints of autumn color, the edges of the birch leaves yellow. The air in the morning has a cool bite now, and mist hangs longer over the fields. It is time. On her last day in the village, Nina packs her bag, heavy now with Grandma's gifts, jars of honey, dried herbs, a pair of knitted wool socks for the cold city winter ahead. She promises Vera that she'll visit again, perhaps in winter or next summer. Sasha is already pleading with her to come back for New Year's, or at least write often. Early the next morning, the village sees Nina off. The once daily bus into the district town honks merrily as it pulls up to the stop where a small crowd has gathered. Many are the same, neighbors who welcomed her weeks ago. They've come to say farewell, showering her with last-minute gifts, a braid of garlic, a loaf of sweet bread for the journey, a small icon of St. Nicholas for protection on the road. Nina is deeply moved. It reminds her of the send-offs described in classic novels, the traveler blessed by the whole community. Grandma Vera gives her an extra tight hug, holding onto her as if to imprint the warmth for the months of separation to come. Take care, Dorogaya, dear one. Write to us when you arrive, Vera whispers, eyes misty yet proud. Nina climbs onto the little Piazzi bus, which will take her to the train station in town for the long trip north. The door closes with a pneumatic hiss. As the bus rolls away, she waves through the dust-speckled window at the cluster of waving villagers, her grandmother blotting her eyes with a corner of her apron, Sasha running alongside the bus for a few yards, as is his habit, and others raising hands in fond goodbye. Nina feels a lump in her throat, but also a deep gratitude. She is carrying with her not just gifts, but the love and lessons of this village. The bus ride into town is quiet and reflective. She sits by the window, watching familiar landmarks slide past one by one. The red roof of the schoolhouse, now empty until classes resume. The apple orchard, where she and Sasha gathered windfall fruit just last week. The turnoff where the road from the highway meets the village lane, still marked by an old milestone from years past. This time, there will be no one meeting her at the station en route. Her journey will be solo, giving her ample time to process all she has experienced over the summer. As the bus reaches the main road, she cranes her neck for a last glimpse of the village's wooden houses, nestled amid golden fields and swaying trees before they disappear from view. Back to school, back to the city, back in the village. Life continues its steady cycle. Only a day after Nina's departure, it is September 1st, Knowledge Day in the Soviet Union, when the school year officially begins. Sasha is up at dawn, unusually without protest, his face scrubbed and hair neatly combed by Vera's careful hand. He dons his school uniform, a crisp white shirt, navy blue shorts, and knee socks, or in colder weather, wool trousers, with his young pioneer red scarf tied smartly at the neck. He looks at himself in the mirror with a mix of pride and nerves. This year he will be in 5th grade, and there will be new teachers, new subjects, perhaps even new classmates coming from other hamlets. After a hearty breakfast of porridge and tea, Sasha slings his satchel, still a bit too large for him, over his shoulder. Inside are a few notebooks, pencils, and an apple to snack on. Vera walks him to the bus stop, the same spot where they waved goodbye to Nina. The morning is cool, and the ground glitters with dew. Overhead, the sky is a pale blue, promising a fair day. One by one, other children appear at the stop, each accompanied by a parent or elder sibling. They are a charming sight, the girls with white bows in their braided hair and carrying bouquets of autumn flowers to present to their teachers, an annual tradition, and the boys trying to appear grown up and nonchalant, but betraying excitement in their bright eyes. The old yellow school bus, actually a repurposed Kayavaze rural bus with worn seats, arrives in a cloud of exhaust. The same driver, Nikolai, opens the door, greeting each child by name as they climb in. He's been driving these village kids for years and has watched them grow season by season. "Climb aboard, scholars," he calls cheerfully. Parents exchange a few words with him about schedules and gently remind him to mind their little ones on the road, as they always do. Sasha finds a seat by the window next to his friend Misha from a neighboring farm. As the bus pulls away, the children wave energetically at their assembled parents and grandparents. Vera waves back, standing with the other villagers until the bus vanishes around a bend, carrying the children towards the district schoolhouse 10 kilometers away. Vera and the other parents then turn to their own daily tasks: fields to tend, bread to bake, cows to milk. The village feels a touch quieter with the children gone for the day, but also filled with the hope that each child on that bus carries, the promise of learning and opportunity that education brings, even to their remote corner of the country. On the bus, Sasha and Misha peer out the window as familiar fields roll by. They point out things they see: a flock of cranes grazing in a stubble field, an old man on a bicycle wobbling along the roadside, the local postman making his rounds. The ride is bumpy but short. Soon the bus joins others converging from various villages at the central school. The children disembark and stream toward the school gate, where teachers wait, some in mauve suits and dresses, and the principal in a well-worn uniform adorned with Soviet pins. There will be a short ceremony, perhaps the raising of the flag, the ringing of the first bell by a first grader, lifted on a senior student's shoulders, a beloved tradition, and then classes will begin. For Sasha, the journey to knowledge is literally a journey. Each morning and afternoon, bouncing along in the trusty school bus, he and his friends transform the mundane ride into a time of storytelling, trading comic books, or singing pioneer songs. The bus has no seat belts, no frills, but it is filled with laughter and sometimes rowdy shouts until Nikolai playfully hollers, "Quiet back there, or I'll turn this bus around." He never has to, of course, and the kids know he's mostly in jest. In Leningrad and Moscow, Nina and Oleg also resume their routines. Nina returns to Leningrad on a long overnight train and is greeted by the first crisp winds off the Baltic. She steps out of the Moskovsky station in the early morning light of September and hops onto a trance that will take her back to her dormitory. The tram's familiar rocking and the city's grand avenues waking up around her feel comforting after her summer in the country. Yet she carries a new calm within her, born of starry village nights and communal harvest days, which she hopes to keep even amid the urban rush. Oleg in Moscow has received Nina's letter describing her safe return and the experiences she cherished. One evening after work, as the autumn dusk falls early, He sits by the window of their apartment with a cup of tea, reading her words by the amber glow of a table lamp. Outside, he can hear the distant roar of a trolley bus on the avenue and the faint sound of neighbors in the stairwell coming home. The letter makes him smile. He imagines the very scenes she wrote about: his mother supervising the samovar, his daughter hefting potatoes, little Sasha running down the lane. Though separated by distance, at that moment he feels closely connected to his family through the vivid descriptions. He carefully folds the letter and tucks it into a journal where he keeps treasured correspondence. As the season advances, Moscow and Leningrad grow cooler. Leaves turn brilliant shades of gold and crimson in city parks. Citizens don their coats again at bus stops. The routine of life without cars continues to play out in countless ways, big and small. In the cities, each day millions descend into the depths of the metro or queue at corner bus stops, participating in a well-practiced dance of crowds. In Moscow, the metro stations themselves are like underground palaces, marble columns, grand chandeliers, and mosaics glimmering under fluorescent light, offering weary commuters a brief moment of beauty on their daily ride. Trains rush in every few minutes with a warm gust of wind, and people step on and off with practiced efficiency. Whether in the capital's ornate halls or a provincial town's humble trolley stop, the pattern is the same. They browse newspapers or paperbacks as electric trains whisk them to work. They stand pressed in buses, cooperating wordlessly to make space, sharing a joke, or rolling their eyes together at a rare service disruption. Private automobiles are rare and expensive to obtain, a fact of life that most simply accept. Thus, the streets belong to public vehicles and throngs of pedestrians, and everyone adapts accordingly. For those in provincial towns and villages, life without cars means planning around the limited bus schedule or hitching the occasional ride on a passing truck. It means walking miles down country lanes under the autumn trees if necessary, or loading a hay wagon with neighbors for a trip to a distant farm. In one way or another, people find a path. And when those paths meet, at a communal bus stop or in a crowded train car, there is a sense of collective journey. As autumn deepens, Nina in Leningrad often finds herself daydreaming during her tram rides across the city. The gentle rocking and squeal of metal on metal become almost hypnotic as she gazes out at the Nevau embankment, now lined with trees shedding leaves onto the granite steps. In those moments, she recalls scenes from the summer: the open back of the truck where she and others sat atop hay bales after a day's work, watching a fiery sunset, the quiet determination on her grandmother's face as she waited at the bus stop, cane in hand, not letting age stop her from making her way, the contentment of fellow passengers nodding off in a warm train carriage as rain tapped on the windows. These memories reassure her that despite the hustle of city life, she's part of something larger, a whole country of people finding their way together. One late October evening, Oleg travels home on a packed trolley bus in Moscow. It's dark and wet outside. Cold rain patters on the roof and fogs the windows. The bus is crowded with workers, all tired, carrying the weight of the day along with dripping umbrellas and briefcases. Oleg stands near the front, having offered his seat earlier to a pregnant woman, and now holds a hand strap for balance. The heater in the trolley bus isn't working well, and a few passengers shiver in their damp coats. The traffic is sluggish, and the trolley bus halts frequently. A sense of irritation might usually permeate in such conditions, but then a small thing happens that shifts the mood. The conductor, an older man with a kindly face, starts humming a tune, just loud enough to be heard over the engine's drone. It's a nostalgic melody, an old wartime song about longing for home. A few passengers recognize it and smile wistfully. One by one, others join in, softly singing the chorus, "One road leads to my home." The effect is calming, almost magical. By the time Oleg steps off at his stop, he's humming too, the earlier chill forgotten. He walks the last few blocks to his building, the rain having eased, and there's a spring in his step despite the puddles. In that moment, he is profoundly aware of the resilience and quiet camaraderie that life without cars has nurtured among his people. In a city of millions, a simple shared song on a trolley can remind everyone that they're in harmony, not just jostling units. As the year winds down, winter will soon creep back with its frosts and snows, completing the cycle. Vera will spend more time indoors by her stove, knitting warm socks for Sasha or mending a quilt, occasionally venturing out with cautious steps and a lantern on early dark afternoons when she hears the distant rumble of the bus bringing her grandson back from school. Oleg will dig out his heavy coat again and join the army of commuters braving blizzards at tram stops, blowing on their hands for warmth as they wait for the comforting sight of that familiar vehicle's lights rounding the corner. Nina will hurry through windy, snow-dusted Leningrad squares to catch the metro, looking forward to the bright, art-filled stations that are sanctuaries from the cold. And so it goes on, season after season, year after year, a tapestry of journeys. There are reunions and partings, crowded rides and serene walks, minor frustrations and surprising joys. In this world, travel isn't just about moving through space. It's an essential part of living in community. Every commute, every errand, every long-distance trip becomes a thread, weaving individuals into the collective story of Soviet life. In the gentle hush that follows these wanderings, you too can find rest. Picture the quiet streets, the distant lullaby of a midnight train, and the soft comfort of knowing the world is moving peacefully around you. Let the echo of these journeys lull you. With each breath, release the day's travels and drift into your own night's gentle journey. May your dreams be filled with calm adventures and the reassuring knowledge that even without cars, life finds its way forward, one tram, one train, one shared walk at a time, carrying everyone gently toward tomorrow. Good night and sleep well.